Welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So glad you joined us for the next hour. I'm Paul Dottino. He's Matt Citak. We're going to preview Notre Dame's draft prospects right off the top. A little bit later on, we're going to hear from Dan Salomone from Giants.com, who was at the owners' meetings and spoke with General Manager Joe Schoen. Then we will also do a preview on South Carolina's football prospects, and then we'll try to take some of your phone calls. But first up, we go to the Fighting Irish, and Eric Hansen of InsideNDSports.com. He is the co-publisher, and he joins us this morning. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, I think we should probably start right up top with the two defensive backs, Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison. Morrison, of course, had some injury history, but these two guys are going to excite a lot of players. I will tell you, since the Combine, I seem to see a little bit of a range, though, in terms of how high these might go. Is it beauty in the eye of the beholder with these guys, or has there just been some legitimate debate as to how good they're going to be?
I think some of it's legitimate for two different reasons. For Morrison, it's more about his health. You know, he was a guy that through his sophomore year at Notre Dame really projected as a first-round draft choice and maybe even in the upper part of the first round. And then he had the hip injury in October and missed the rest of the season. Now, he hasn't run the 40 yet. He said he's going to do that at a private workout. He said that at Pro Day last Thursday, and we'll see if and when that happens. So I think, again, the concern with him isn't his film. I mean, you look at the receivers that he covered in college and the stats that he put up in his two healthy years and half of a healthy year in 2024, and he's really good. Xavier Watts is a guy that came to Notre Dame as a wide receiver and kind of moved over to defense because Notre Dame was desperate for linebackers, and then Kyle Hamilton gets hurt, and they move him to safety, and the light bulb comes on, and he turns out to be a two-time All-American. Where I think there's concerns about Xavier is he's not Kyle Hamilton's size and length, and but he certainly has the production. I mean, you look at his numbers. He's really good. He ran, I think, a 4.56 40, which isn't blazing, but a lot of other Notre Dame safeties have been kind of in that neighborhood that have done really well in the NFL. In fact, I think that was Kyle Hamilton's speed, and Harrison's with the Vikings as well. Harrison Smith was in that neighborhood. So I think there's some debate on if Xavier Watts is as good as he's ever going to get, and you're not going to get a better player with some football ahead of him. But I would pick him in a heartbeat. His instincts are amazing.
So moving over to the other side of the ball real quick. Mitchell Evans, seems to be considered a very, reliable blocker. And it seems like reports are saying that, when he gets into the NFL, the blocking he'll be able to pick up pretty quickly. But my question is, how much do you think of a ceiling there is to his receiving part to his game?
Now, he's got injuries too, though, he's coming off of.
Wasn't that?
Yeah, he came off an ACL tear. He was Notre Dame's leading receiver by far when he tore his ACL in October of 2023. And he came back earlier than some guys would. He was in the lineup early. I don't know that we ever saw the best version of Mitchell Evans this year through the grind of 16 games. For college kids, that's a lot. And he was a much better receiver last year than he was this year. I think he's going to get back to that. He's a high school quarterback that adapted well to a position change in college. He was recruited as a tight end, and I just think the healthy version of Mitchell Evans is going to be a surprise, or at least a productive receiver as well as a good blocker. I think he's good all around.
I like his toughness. He seems like a very rugged player to me, Eric. I mean, I don't think this is a kid who's afraid to get his hands dirty.
He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's not afraid to do a lot of things, including when Sam Hartman was the quarterback at Notre Dame a couple seasons ago. They sometimes called it a Mitchapalooza. They'd bring him in as the quarterback to get those third and 1 and 4th and 1 first down. So he's not afraid to mix it up in the middle of a pile.
I'm going to skip over a couple of defensive guys only because I don't know how short we're going to be on time. And I just want to go to two guys who have Giants pedigree, Howard Cross the third and R.J. Oben, both sons of guys who played here with the Giants. I know that at different points during the season, they've had different guys who were really supportive of their NFL prospects and other people who see them more as role players. I've got to ask you about them, if only because of the Giants connection.
Let me start with Howard. I mean, Howard was an All-American in 2023 when he was fully healthy. He played through a really chronic ankle injury, but super productive guy. I think there are teams that will be scared off by his size. You know, he's 6'1", and he's under 300 pounds, and yet super productive, really good burst, plays with his hands very well. I like Howard Cross a lot. R.J. Oben, I'd say most of the people that covered him this year would term him as a disappointment. He had a really big sack in the Georgia game. The one play that's memorable from his time, I think he was steady, but the thought was that he was going to be a dominant player with Notre Dame, and he just never was. He was a guy that was assignment correct. I think if he's got more in the tank, he needs to start showing it. But he was not a particularly impressive player at Notre Dame.
So final question for me, I got to ask about, of course, Riley Leonard. You know, after 3 seasons at Duke, transfers to Notre Dame, puts together his best season and really established himself as a dual threat quarterback. He had 1 year at Duke where he had a lot of success on the ground, but nothing that compared to what he did for Notre Dame this past season. And he's got the size as well. So what aspect of his game does he need to improve on to sort of establish himself as an NFL quarterback?
He needs to evolve as a passer, and that's why he came to Notre Dame, and he got better over the year. It hurt him that he had to miss spring practice with a second ankle surgery. But the guy can pick up 3rd and 4th and 1s. He's a prolific runner, great leader, great in the locker room, everything you want in a next-door neighbor, but he needs to become a more accurate, more consistent passer, and he has the athletic ability to do it. And so it'll be interesting to see who takes a chance on him and then, lets him incubate a little bit as a backup and see how much he picks up. But great attitude. He's worth, I think, a gamble.
All right, I want to go back to defense for one other player. Riley Mills intrigues me a bit because his measurables are very exciting. The production, not necessarily. I know he had the knee injury. I know he's not much of a pass rusher. At least he doesn't project to be much. How do you see his potential role if he were to carve out a part-time situation in the NFL?
Well, I think, he ended up leading Notre Dame in sacks, but they were very even across the board. Mm-hmm. When he and Howard were healthy at the same time, they were really good. The problem was they weren't healthy at the same time very much this year. But I think this is a guy that's best football is ahead of him. He had a much better year this year than last year. Early in his career, he bounced back and forth between the edge and the defensive tackle. Once he settled into defensive tackle, you started to see some growth with him. So I really like where Riley Mills is headed.
If I can go back just a second, I want to go back to Benjamin Morrison because we kind of left this on the table. The Giants used to play a lot more man. Then last year they played a lot more zone. As you see his fit in the National Football League, what do you think he's going to be better at? Because some of these guys are very scheme-specific.
Oh, I think he could do both. Notre Dame played a lot of man. And he can play. I know in the NFL it's a little bit different. In college, the hash marks are different, so boundary and field means a lot. Doesn't mean as much on the NFL level, but he could play either side. He's got the speed, and he's also has the physicality to handle a big receiver into the boundary. That would not be my concern with Benjamin Morrison. My only concern is if his hip heals. Otherwise, I mean, look at the Ohio State tape from 2023 with him on Marvin Harrison Jr. and see how good he is.
What do we know right now in terms of, as we sit here this morning, what is the latest information on his physical condition?
I mean, he says that he's healed quite a bit, and he feels good enough that he's going to run a 40 before the draft.
That's
He
good.
did not run the 40 at Pro Day Thursday, but he wants to do it in a private workout, I guess, control the conditions a little bit more.
If he does, what do you expect his time to be? Are there estimates? Do the coaches, do they have an idea of what they think he'll run?
I think he would run under 4.5. I don't know much below that, but again, it's not just his speed; it's his instincts, it's his length, it's his physicality. He's got a lot of things going for him and he's got the tape. I mean, he's played against elite receivers and has big numbers, big interception numbers, big pass breakup numbers. He's a tackler in the run game. He's really good.
Well, I appreciate your time, Eric Hansen. So much give information here about Notre Dame, and it is InsideNDSports.com. He is the co-publisher covering Notre Dame football, and we certainly are going to keep an eye out on the guys that we just talked to you about. Eric, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again down the road.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Take care.
Great stuff. You know, it's funny. We keep talking about the Giants' improvements on defense. And, you know, they still need help on the defensive line. I mean, there's no question in my mind. Matt, they're going to have to get some more bodies up there. And I'm not sure if it'll wind up being one of these guys. I don't know, because there are so many guys available in this draft. But this defense is not done yet.
No, definitely not. And, you know, we've spoken about it a lot the last couple of weeks that I would think that especially defensive tackle, the interior defensive line, and potentially the edge as well could be areas that the Giants choose to address in the draft and sooner rather than later. I will say in terms of the interior defensive line, me personally, I've got my eyes more set on a guy from the school we'll be talking about later, South Carolina.
Yeah, I know
so
what you mean.
We'll save that for
I'm not going to spoil it.
We'll save that for a little bit later. I would hope that of these Notre Dame prospects, you know, the defensive tackles are a little further down draft boards. I would hope that the Giants address the position earlier than, you know, where those guys are, but we'll see. We're a few weeks out, so we know they'll be adding some bodies to that room, one way or the other.
That is for sure. Let's go down to Florida in the NFL League meetings, where Dan Salomone from Giants.com is standing by. Dan, come on. Now, tell me the truth. Are you hanging out by the pool right now?
Not the pool. We are at Pearson and I are about to tee off in the fourth hole, so you got a little bit of time right now.
Wow.
We are locked in a hotel room writing right now. It is nothing glorious.
We finally got you on BBK, Dan.
There we go. I know, it's bizarro world. I'm down here with Pearson. Schmelk's on the phone. So this is great.
Well, just make sure Pearson avoids the alligators, okay? Because I'm a little afraid about his escapability out of the pocket.
Yeah.
Hey, so Joe Schoen had a one-on-one interview with you, which is currently on Giants.com. The transcription is up there now as it stands. But Joe also met with the media this morning and had a session with them as well. So before we ask you any questions at all, why don't we say to you, what was maybe the one thing that stuck out above all else during those two conversations?
Well, aside from hearing, we haven't heard, just them talking about Russell Wilson yet and stuff, but I think the biggest takeaway is I like the way you put it. Just he wants to go into the draft being able to play a game that day, and he feels like they're at a position there, and now you're not backed into a corner at number 3, and you can go any which way now at number 3.
Yeah, so talking about, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, what did Joe mention, if he mentioned at all, about, what attracted him or the team to those two guys in particular?
Yeah, I think with Russell, there's skin on the wall is what he used to say, what he kept saying. He's a 10-time Pro Bowler, won a Super Bowl, a lot of production, which he hasn't seen since Eli. And that's what's drawn him there. And obviously the whole leadership aspect there. And Russell obviously talked about that in his introductory press conference. He's there. He wanted to lead the team throughout the process. So that was obviously a draw. And then Jameis is there too. I mean, been up front. Giants have played 7 quarterbacks in the past 2 years, so they've needed somebody back there. And Jameis, same thing. He's hit a couple of 300-yard seasons last year and still productive, so that's always an option there too.
We'll stay with the quarterback topic for a second here, Dan, because it was obvious during the media scrum that the writers were doing everything they could to cram a number 3 pick quarterback down his throat. And I thought it was really interesting. Joe just flat out said, you know what? You always want to get a franchise quarterback if you can. But at the same time, if the guy doesn't fit the slot, if the grade doesn't match, if he doesn't check all the boxes, you don't take him. He was very clear about not forcing one just for the sake of forcing one. And I thought that's the first time we've actually heard him be so definitive in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. That's the worst thing you can do, and that's what he feels like he's done in free agency with Russell now. And, they're not backed into the corner doing that now.
Now moving to the other side of the ball, the two, so far biggest or two of the biggest offseason acquisitions obviously came in the secondary with cornerback Paulson Adebo and safety Javon Holland. This is the first time, we've heard from Joe talking about those two acquisitions. So what exactly did he say about, why they brought those two guys in particular in, and I guess how he sees them fitting in both on and off the field?
Yeah, right away it's instincts and ball skills. I think that was the two things that he said right away for both of them, and that was, taking away the ball. That was the thing the Giants struggled with on defense last year. And he also loves the experience they bring, young secondary last year. I was talking to him they set up kind of a buddy system with Banks and Drew with Adebo, and then Newbin with Holland there in the secondary. And now that'll be a good thing. They can grow together now, and there's a core there that's under contract, and you toss in Dexter and Burns, so you're starting to see the continuity. I think that was another main takeaway. You're starting to see the continuity there on defense, that these guys can all grow together. And I didn't know Shane had a good tidbit about Holland, just kind of talking about tying in the draft process, about how you do these interviews and homework and stuff. Even if you don't end up drafting them, you still bank all that information for free agency coming up. He knew Holland back to the days with the Bills, and that's kind of what led him there. Mm-hmm. He said he even had a Zoom conversation still on his phone with Holland. So he was able to go back and you kind of build that relationship there.
Let me go back a second to something on offense. I thought I heard this, and you have to clarify for me, Dan, because you were there in person. But I thought in reviewing the comments, he said something to the effect that they've talked to the agent for Evan Neal and have discussed with him the possibility of cross-training at guard. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah. Basically that he's open to it. He'll do whatever's best to help the team was the main takeaway there, and that he's open to it if it means playing guard or tackle.
Well, see, that's interesting because in the past, the Giants have had some offensive linemen, and we don't have to name names right here. It's not important. But we know they were talked to about, hey, would you be open to this? And they said, no, I'm not changing position, and I'm not going to do that. So I think there is something to be said for the fact that communication has happened, and it's something that's on the table and has been accepted as such. Yeah,
definitely. And then that kind of ties into the whole thing, getting Greg Van Roten back. Now they have the 5, starting offensive linemen from last year. Then also it was important to get James Hudson there as the swing tackle, which Shane was stressing there. Just how important that is. It's Andrew Thomas going down the past couple of years, how important that is. And then obviously now you have 5 picks in the top 105, and wouldn't shock me if that's a position they go to within, in that range too, to help out the trenches there.
Yeah, so a couple of minutes ago you mentioned continuity, and now that we're talking about the offensive line, you just brought up obviously the return of Greg Van Roten. The Giants now have all 5 starting offensive linemen from the beginning of last season now returning, and assumption would be projected to start again in 2025, at least to start the year. And in your one-on-one interview with Joe, he sort of spoke about what Greg Van Roten brings, again, both on and potentially more importantly off the field. And I think you mentioned this in the scrum with the media as well, that he kind of mentioned GVR as a glue guy, right?
Yeah, he's a glue guy. Yeah, glue guy, exactly. Yeah, and what people don't see, off the field. The leadership that he has there, and he's good for that room, a veteran presence for John Michael Schmitz and Kubis, and all that is good there.
One other thing I thought, Dan, as he was asked about potentially moving or doing something with his picks, he was very clear in saying they have not compiled all the information yet. And I think people need to understand that Joe himself does do firsthand stuff with this. I mean, he's going out to pro days. He's going out to scout stuff as well as his staff. He is not sitting around the office. He's out there on the front lines.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know. I did that interview with him when I think he was literally walking off the field at Ole Miss, and I had to pull over and I had to get him in a parking lot by my son's daycare to get him. So we're both busy people, but no, that's a good point, because that stood out to me too over there. You kind of get in your head that these things are just set in stone, but they're not. Even we're less than a month out, a couple of weeks out, and it's still teams are still in the information gathering process. And he brought that up a couple times. One, when they're asking about moving up to one. It's just like these teams, there's still a lot of these top guys haven't even had their private workouts and stuff like that. So there's still a lot. Everything goes up right till the wire.
All right, that's Dan Salomone from Giants.com. He and Pearson Butler are down there at the NFL League meetings in Florida, hoping to stay safe away from those alligators and also probably staying safe away from some of those rowdy parties that people have down there very often. See, that's only funny because you guys don't know these two guys. Dan and Pearson, I don't think they're the party animal type. Guys, we'll talk to you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
See you guys.
We will get back to those guys when they make it back here to New Jersey and get some cleanup stuff on all the different things that they were there. We got a couple of minutes here before we go to the South Carolina guest. So why don't we get a quick phone call in? Scott from Portland, Maine. You are first on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good to talk to you.
Good. How are you, Scott?
Good, thanks. Been listening for many, many years. First time calling in.
Well, thank you.
I just want to talk about the quarterback situation and potentially a little bit about the draft, if I could.
Go ahead.
I was kind of on the same bandwagon as Paul was when I heard Jameis Winston was a potential. I kind of want to treated him like the Grinch and didn't want to touch him with a 39.5 a pole.
Well, he's only here to be the backup, so I think it's okay.
Once they signed Ross, here with the situation with Jameis, because as a backup, that's I think that makes a lot of sense for the money and everything.
Sure.
Then the draft, I'm hoping Abdul Carter is there at number 3, as long as all the medical checks out. I know he's got a shoulder and an ankle thing going on, but I would like Abdul because I think Kayvon is a nice player, but he's not like what Paul calls him, a headache player. Teams aren't really having a game plan against double-teaming Kayvon Thibodeau. And I grew up rooting for Giants defenses back in, the early 2000s where we had Strahan, Tuck, and Umanora and these great pass rushers, and I would just love to get another one of those guys in there.
Nothing wrong with extra pass rushers, I'll tell you that. But you do have to have a plan B in mind just in case the medicals are not too happy with what they found out. Scott, we got to run real quick because we're almost up against it. I'd like to try to sneak in Ben from Florham Park before we go to our South Carolina guest. Ben, you're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Thanks. I'll try to be succinct.
Sure.
One of the things and I'll just make an observation and a couple of questions. The thing that bothers me about Shane is the lack of a overarching multi-year strategy. It seems that he is reactionary, and I do get that every GM has to be reactionary based on year to year, but we're one of the worst teams in the league. You have to have a multi-year strategy, and it seems like it's whipsawing back and forth. Case in point, they don't sign Xavier McKinney. His commentary was, well, you can't really spend top dollar in safety. Fast forward a year, they spent about $1.5 million per year less to re-sign Holland, who's a very good safety, not as good a safety as Xavier McKinney. So it's just kind of this whipsaw back and forth. It seems like we're reactionary. We need a multi-year plan to bring us back up into relevance, let alone being competitive for an NFC East crown.
One thing I just want to just jump in real quick and say is that there were reports leading into this year's free agency from some of the beat writers for the Giants that, explicitly said that the Giants made an effort to bring Xavier McKinney back last year, but he ended up getting, record-setting safety numbers, and the Giants sort of got priced out of his range. So they're definitely, believe those reports. There were efforts made to retain Xavier. He just got a crazy deal from the Packers, which obviously after 1 year looks like it was worth it because he obviously had an amazing season. But I wouldn't, think that I don't think it's fair to say that in that sense that the front office didn't have a long-term plan or sights thinking about it, because they clearly took Tyler Nubin in the second round last year as one way to address the safety position, and did go out and sign the top safety available in this year's free agent market in Javon Holland. And I know you mentioned $1.5 million less, but it's also, the salary cap went up 35 million. So Holland is now here on a deal somewhat significantly lower percentage of the cap than what Xavier McKinney signed 1 year ago.
And caller, please, there's one other thing that you have to keep in mind, and most people don't. When you sign a player with X number of dollars attached to that contract, it's not just the stuff that's on tape. If you've heard Joe Schoen talk at all about Holland, and I know you don't have that ability because you weren't down in Florida, but he talked a lot about his leadership skills and his locker room character. That stuff does count for some of the value of the contract. So please do keep that in mind.
And he also, Javon Holland just turned 25 a couple of weeks ago. He's in that age range where he can grow with this nucleus of defensive backs that the Giants have acquired over the last couple of off seasons.
Anyway. Okay?
And just a quick question. Do we get a compensatory pick for Saquon? I know we got a 3 for McKinney, but is there another one coming for Saquon? And then real quick, I know you're up against it. Given all the signings, would you re-rank our needs in the draft in which QB isn't number one? And thanks for your time.
Thank you for the call.
Well, to start, no, the Giants are not getting a compensatory pick for Saquon. The one pick that they got at the end of the third round is the only compensatory pick they are getting this offseason or this year in this year's draft. Just with who they signed last year and who signed elsewhere, it lined up where they're getting the one compensatory pick for Xavier McKinney, and it's one of the top compensatory picks, so kind of worked out. And Joe, in the one-on-one interview with Dan Salomone, Joe kind of spoke about how they, were looking last offseason at the compensatory pick in this year's draft, and that was sort of a reasoning for why they, may have signed or not signed certain players.
Yeah, that's pick number 99, by the way.
Yes.
Overall, 99, third round.
End of day two. And then...
That's a valuable pick.
Yeah, oh, yeah, very valuable pick. And then just in terms of addressing needs, in the draft now, I don't think for 2025, obviously, that quarterback is now the number one need like it was, 2 weeks ago. It certainly is not, in my opinion, the number one for this year. But as Joe spoke about, as we've spoken about a lot, when it comes to the quarterback position, you need long-term stability as well. So I do think it is still up there as one of the highest priorities because you still want to try to find that long-term answer. But I don't know necessarily if it would be number one on my rankings now.
All right, so we go to prospect preview number 2 on today's show, and we talk to Wes Mitchell, host of the Gamecock Takeover on 107.5, The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. Wes, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Hey, how we doing, guys?
Real well.
Good.
And I got to tell you something. When you look at Nick Emanuele, he is a freak of an athlete. 4'3" in his 40, 6'3", 220 pounds. Obviously, he's going to be a, mid-first round pick, I would think. Who knows? Maybe he goes even a little bit higher. But physically, the tools on this guy, that's got to make everybody smile.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think we were all pretty aware of here in Columbia. And you look at what he did at the Combine, the national word has started to get out about who Nick is and what he's all about just athletically. And then I think the thing about him, once the media and of course, the coaches and the scouts started to dive into the film, what they would see with Nick is that, the film and the production honestly matches his athletic ability as well. You know, you obviously see guys come out sometimes that are only going to get drafted based on their potential, or, you know, they might be a workout warrior, might be have elite speed. But the thing with Nick, he literally entered the field about 7 to 8 snaps into his freshman year. The guy that was a senior ahead of him got injured. He stepped into the starting lineup on the first drive of that series and or of that game, and then has started literally when healthy every game since. So you've got 3 full years worth of productivity from Nick Eamon-Worry. He entered the offseason more, I think, as maybe an early second, late first round projection. But then after what he did at that combine, from what we've heard, I would say more mid to kind of the 20s potentially at the latest in the first round.
Yeah, so looking at South Carolina's, top prospects in this year's draft, it's really dominated by the defensive side of the ball. So I'm going to stick with the defense, and I kind of teased this earlier that there is a defensive lineman from South Carolina that is one of my, sort of ideal picks for the Giants on day 2 of the draft, and has been a popular day 2 pick for the Giants in a lot of mock drafts as well. Of course, I'm talking about TJ Sanders. He had a lot of, solid production the last 2 seasons for South Carolina. I would say maybe a little bit undersized for an interior defensive lineman, coming in at 290 pounds. So other than maybe like beefing up a little bit, putting on a little bit more weight, what areas do you think Sanders needs to just improve his game a little bit in order to really establish himself as like a starting defensive tackle in the NFL?
Yeah, and I'll try to pull the numbers real quick, but I think he was up. He was up to above 300 at Pro Day. I think it was about 304, 305, something like that. So I imagine what you're talking about has probably been, an emphasis on what teams are telling him going into the draft is, hey, we need you to bulk up a little bit. I think for him too, guys, it's probably just, showing a little bit more consistency on film. Like when you look at the flash plays though, like when you look at what he is capable of, had to have been one of the more just naturally talented guys that South Carolina had on defense. And then this was a super talented defense all the way around, and he really still found a way at times to stand out and flash. And, they had really 3 interior defensive linemen that were really good, really talented. And so they kind of had 3 co-starters for 2 spots, which let those guys maybe not play as many snaps as they would have had to and just do a lot of rotating. And, I think he benefited from that. And I think the thing with TJ gives you a little bit of position versatility at some parts in his career. When Carolina was more in a 3-man front, they would play him out as kind of a defensive end. And then, of course, he'd play inside in a 4-man front. And I think the thing about him, too, is just the ability when you get in pass rush situations to close on the quarterback, to use his feet to create separation and finish plays off. Like I said, the consistency is something that scouts will want a little bit more of from him, I think. But when you start talking about upside and just kind of pass rush ability from that inside spot, maybe as a 3 technique, I would imagine at the NFL level. Yeah, he's got a lot of there's only so many guys that can move like he can at his size.
Yeah, totally agree. Kyle Kennard, 4 years at Georgia Tech, gets to South Carolina, 6'4", mid-250s. Okay, 4'7", all right, maybe you'd like it to be a little bit faster. That's why he's not going to be a first-round pick, right? But nonetheless, he's got a heck of a motor. He's got length. He's got a repertoire of moves to try to beat guys. To me, he's one of those value pass rushers that you might be able to get late on the second day, or I don't know if he drops to the 4th round. Probably not. I would think late second day. Your thoughts in terms of him being a rotational pass rushing guy off the edge?
Yeah, incredibly productive for South Carolina this year. I think that's partially to credit Kyle Kennard for that himself, partially credit Sterling Lucas, who is South Carolina's kind of edges, defensive ends coach, and has quickly become a fast riser in this industry just in terms of being known for development of guys. And so Kennard came in, and one thing they really looked at for what he did at Georgia Tech was they looked at his film and they said, man, you're in position to make a lot of plays, and just didn't quite finish them off. And, I think they looked at his sack total at Georgia Tech and said, that was part of the recruiting pitch was, hey, we can help you double this. And lo and behold, that ends up happening at South Carolina. Like I said, this is a talented South Carolina front, so I do think to an extent they all benefited from each other. South Carolina has Dylan Stewart on the other side as well, arguably the best freshman pass rusher in the country, certainly one of the top 2 or 3 in that category. So all those guys did benefit each other. You would have liked to have seen, like you said, the 40 maybe get a split second faster. He ran at the combine. I think was hoping the pro day would flash a little bit quicker, but I think he was in the 4.7s again. So I agree that that's probably what some of the NFL teams will maybe check as a reason for waiting a little bit longer. But when you look at the production, especially this past season, it's there. And also he's a locker room guy too, just being around him for a year here. Great leader, a team first guy, smart kid. I think that's one kind of check mark a lot of these Carolina defenders that we've talked about have is, you've got just good guys that are going to be locker room leaders potentially as well. So for Kennard, I think it's also just about finding that proper fit. I mean, I think in NFL terms, he's not going to be quite the biggest or fastest guy out there, but he is productive and will hold up against the run as well, is willing to set the edge, all those things. And probably is, I think you said, a value pick. I think that's a good way to put it. Somebody is probably going to be pretty happy with what they get out of Kyle Kennard.
Yeah, sticking on the defense, another guy, Demetrius Knight. Honestly, when looking at the tape, stats, the scouting reports, it's really hard to find too many faults in his game. Good in run defense, solid pass rusher, good in coverage. So I guess my question is, do you think that the only real knock on him going into the draft is just the fact that he is going to be one of the oldest prospects in this draft? Because it really seems like he's one of those guys that can step in on day one and immediately contribute.
Yeah, and I think South Carolina has a couple of guys that are like that. This is a very veteran defense. Several players that did stick around in college and just kept trying to develop their game, and teams will look back and they'll see, well, hey, why did this not happen before? And so he started his career at Georgia Tech. But the thing about him, he was a quarterback in high school. He was kind of a quarterback / safety. Was a smaller guy at the time, and just as he got to college, they were trying to figure out the best position for him. He goes to Charlotte for a year, bulks up into a linebacker, has a phenomenal year there. South Carolina loses several linebackers, is looking for help in the portal, finds D Knight, that's what they call him here, finds D Knight, and it just ended up being a perfect fit. I mean, probably in 1 year, if you polled the coaches in secret, they would probably tell you one of their favorite players they've ever had here, just in terms of being a leader and just very quickly, even coming in as that transfer, as a 1 year guy. He comes in and just instantly became someone that the locker room looked up to, which in the transfer portal era is not always easy to do, I think. So I think on top of what y'all are seeing on film, a phenomenal human being. Like he's married, 2 kids, so he's already an adult. Like he's mature. I know I've said good things about all the guys, but if you said, hey, I got to bet my future on a guy, I'd put it on D Knight just because he's just so well-rounded as a human and a player.
Wes, I know we're kind of running out of time with you, so I'm going to kind of put 2 guys together on offense. Joshua Simon, the tight end, Rocket Sanders, the running back. Sanders, of course, has an injury history. Both of these guys came to the program later on out of the transfer portal. Simon, a receiving tight end. Sanders, a guy who seems to have some all-around ability.
Yeah, Rocket Sanders, honestly, if he was a little bit younger and didn't quite have the wear that he has to this point, probably would be way higher on the boards, in my opinion, just based on talent. I mean, big-bodied guy, can run between the tackles, but also has, for his size, I think really good breakaway speed. Also, one thing we saw South Carolina use him was in the passing game quite a bit, whether that was sometimes designing things for him, but a lot of times just being that check down. And, South Carolina had a young quarterback this year, Lenore Sellers, and as the year went on, he got more and more comfortable just checking the ball down to rocket and just knowing, hey, he's going to make plays. He's going to make the first guy miss. So I'm very curious to see what the combination of all the things we just talked about in terms of the injuries, the longevity, but also just the baseline talent, what that means for Rocket. And then Josh Simon, I was very happy for Josh that he put down the time he did at the Combine. I thought that was a great 40 for him because he's pretty productive on film. Like, I just wondered if he was going to have the measurables that the NFL teams were looking for. Went to Indy, ran a great time. This is a tough-nosed country kid, grew up in a small town here in South Carolina, has really developed at the college level, gotten bigger, but always has just had kind of that tough-nosed mindset. And, I think Josh will probably be someone that wouldn't be a flashy pick for anyone, but I also wouldn't be shocked if, like, we blinked and he was one of those dudes that we were like, well, it's been 6 years. Josh Simon's still in the league, just doing his thing. And while, as you said, he is a pass catcher, he's at least a willing blocker. Like, he's willing to put his face in the fan, so to speak. He's willing to get in there and do the dirty work that you have to do at that position. So, he'll go catch the football for you. But as this is a South Carolina team that had question marks at wide receiver. So for a good portion of the year, they were just saying, look, our most consistent receiver right now is actually at the tight end position in Josh Simon. So he took on a major role for them in the passing game and really played well and is willing to go over the middle, is willing to just show that toughness that you need. So, both those guys, it'll be fascinating to see where they end up because I think they're kind of in that category where it wouldn't surprise you if a team takes a chance on either of those guys, but it also wouldn't surprise you if it's a little bit later.
Yeah, so last one real quick. I want to ask about one of the guys alongside TJ Sanders on the defensive line in Tonka Hemingway. Very athletic, did well at the Combine, but measured in at 6'3", 284 pounds, which is obviously on the lighter side for a defensive tackle. So do you think, I don't know if he's beefed up, at the pro day, if he weighed in and more, but do you see him lining up as an interior defensive lineman in the NFL, or do you think he'll have to make some sort of move maybe to the outside?
Yeah, it's a valid question. Watching him throughout his career, they did play him both, sometimes on the edge, sometimes inside. He moves like more of an interior guy, honestly. We'll see if he can hold up at that size or if teams will say, look, we just need you to bulk up and be more of a true interior guy. That was always, honestly, frankly, kind of the question in South Carolina was, hey, do we just bulk him all the way up or do we say, dude, you got to drop about 20 lbs and just be all in on playing the edge.
Come on, Wes, get him a meal card.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. And so ultimately it ended up being inside. Now, he's another guy that he can help you on special teams. Actually ran some trick plays for him on special teams on PAT. He has caught a couple of 2-point conversions in his career. Was a standout when they go back to high school, standout basketball and baseball player. So good balance, good footwork. Really is a good, above average for sure athlete at that size. So I think he's another one that it'll be fascinating to see what the teams in the league think about him when it really comes down to those big decisions.
Folks, that's Wes Mitchell, host of the Gamecock Takeover, 107.5 The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. Wes, thanks so much for all the information on the prospects. We're looking forward to seeing them in the draft. Stay well.
Thanks, Wes.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Great
stuff. That's a lot of prospects we got through.
Oh, yeah.
In the last 45 minutes. And, of course, no question about Dan Salomone. He's not a prospect. That guy's a bona fide first-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
We got to throw him in there, too, during the first 45 minutes of the program.
If it were up to him, we would just take all Ohio State players. And he has said that to me several times in the last couple of weeks.
To be frank, they went pretty far.
They did. It wouldn't be the worst strategy.
It's not like they don't have some legitimate players.
Very true.
That is for sure. I think one of the interesting parts that we talked about with both of these guys, and we'll get back to the calls in just a second. I just want to say this. We've talked about Abdul Carter and the injury situation. Well, even today, we just talked to South Carolina and Notre Dame experts who told us that they had some bona fide prospects who have some lingering injury history as well. The medical staffs are, and they always are critical, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's why they do the combine. It's all about the medical checks. But it does seem as though, as I've been going through my research, and I don't know if you've done the same, and John's done the same too, there seem to be a lot more guys who have some type of injury background than I remember in recent years.
Yeah, I think especially, some guys that are projected and supposed to be first-round picks and some early first-round picks. Obviously, Abdul Carter is a top 3 or 4 pick.
Yeah.
He obviously has some potential medical concerns. But, yeah, I mean, that's just, as you said, it emphasizes just how important getting these guys into your building and having your medical staff sort of check them out as much as they can.
You got to trust those guys
visits
because they need to make that right call for you.
Sure. And I know that people in this building trust the medical staff. Very much so. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of trust in the medical staff in determining whether or not some of these guys do potentially have long-term injury concerns, or if it's something that, they'll get over pretty quickly and be able to ready to go for training camp in day one.
All right, we've got about 15 minutes or so left in the program. I know we'd love to get back to the calls. Let's see. It looks like Arnold from Buffalo is up next on the program. You're on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul. Hey.
Nice to talk to you.
So,
hey.
What I want to say is, I think people aren't giving Joe Schoen enough credit. He doesn't have a crystal ball. I think he's doing a good job. Nobody would have ever got rid of Daniel Jones when he won a playoff game. We had to pay him. I think people are, and then Saquon left. I think people aren't giving him enough credit for trying, really. What do you think?
Well, I'll say this in terms of the comment you made about Jones. I have not gone back and looked, let's say, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, how many times a team allowed a quarterback coming off of a playoff victory to go to another team. I don't think it's happened very often.
Especially one that the team themselves drafted.
Yeah, I don't have the stats on that, but I would say push comes to shove, a great majority of your GMs would not allow that guy to leave.
Especially coming off what was his best overall season in the NFL.
And a heck of a playoff game, too.
Yeah.
The Minnesota playoff game, he was dynamite. So, I'm with you. I think all you can do when you look at somebody who's got to make these kinds of decisions time and time and time again is say, okay, at the time of the decision, what were his options? What possibilities were the most logical? And did he take a reasonable path? That's the only way you can grade a guy, because too many people just want to use hindsight. And as I always say, hindsight is always perfect. It's always 20/20. It's easy just to talk about the results. But when you grade a guy in that chair, intent and rationale and logic and his plan, his progression, that stuff is incredibly important when you're making a decision as to the man's ability to do the job.
Yeah, not only that, but everyone seems to forget or just ignore the fact that the Giants made a strong effort to try to move up in last year's draft to get one of those top 3 quarterbacks.
By the way, they also tried to get Matt Stafford this year.
Yeah, but going back to everyone's like, oh, well, why hasn't Joe Schoen drafted his own quarterback? Well, he very much tried last year. I mean, we all saw Hard Knocks where the negotiations with the Patriots were front and center. The Commanders with the number 2 pick were never going to trade that number 2 pick to the Giants so they could go take Jaden Daniels. I mean, I see everyone be like, oh, Joe Schoen's son, why didn't he just listen to his son?
Right?
You don't think that if Joe Schoen had an opportunity to move up to number 2 for Jaden Daniels, he wouldn't have taken it?
And move it to this year.
Of course he would have.
Move it to this year. What if the Tennessee Titans are sitting there saying, there's no way we're trading that number 1 pick. We're taking Cam Ward, and we're not making a deal.
Yeah.
How is that Joe Schoen's fault?
Exactly.
I agree with you guys. And then the same thing with Barkley. I love Barkley. I got his jersey. Everybody does, but he didn't want to stay. If he would have stayed, it would have been different. He made it not won the Super Bowl, but, I think things would have been different. People like to complain about what he did. I don't think it's right.
Well, Arnold, I'll just say this about Barkley, and we're going to let you go. Appreciate the phone call. Please call again. Saquon Barkley, if he had run for 1,200 or 1,300 yards this year for this past season for the Giants, that would have been a really good season. He was not going to rush for 2,000 yards behind this line.
No, not especially when the offensive line started getting hit by all those injuries, right. Week 6 and on. Yeah, there was no chance. And again, we don't have to harp on this because we've done it many times, but let's not forget, for a very long time, there were strong efforts also made to try to retain Saquon Barkley.
At least 3.
And this was when the running back market, was quote unquote at its, low point. There were efforts made to try to bring him back. He was holding out for a bigger contract that led to the franchise tag in 2023, and the rest is history. Yep. But to go back and say, oh, the Giants just let him go without trying to keep him, that's just revisionist history.
No question. Line 2 has Elliot in Puerto Rico. How about that? We got a call from across the border. How are you?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. What's up, Elliot?
Hi, Paul. Hi, Matt. Long time no calling.
Well, thanks for calling back then.
Thank you. I just have a question. This year will be my 40th year of fandom.
Okay.
And I have a very little knowledge about the schedule. And my belief was that the schedule of the teams that finished last will be easier the next year just to keep a balance in the league. And for the love of God, our schedule is very, very, very hard. So
I got you.
I don't understand what happened there. So if you can, bring me some light in that,
so
that would be wonderful.
I'll tell you this, Elliot. You are right that, in theory, when a team comes in 4th place in the division, that you would think that the next year their schedule would be at least a little bit lighter. But where you finish in the division, that only impacts 3 of the games on your schedule the next season. All the other opponents are already predetermined. There's a big rotation that you cycle through different opponents every couple of years, depending on, the division and all that. So the only 3 games that finishing in 4th place in the NFC East impacted were, I believe it was the 49ers, who obviously the one year that the 49ers happened to finish last is when we finished last as well. So now we line up with them. Then it's New England. And then who's the NFC North, I believe?
Was it the Bears?
I think it was the Bears then, who obviously are, an up-and-coming team. I think that was, I might be mistaken. But,
I'm not sure.
But, yeah, it just, the way that all the other teams finished in their divisions, the Giants didn't really get help from their opponents, in terms of the same place finish in the division opponent. So, in theory, yes, finishing 4th place, you would think the schedule should be a little bit easier, but, sometimes you get hit with a little bit of bad luck and, having to face the 49ers coming off their one down year in the last however many years, that's just kind of unfortunate luck.
The division rotation can hurt you or help you, but then the other problem is the teams within your division. And Washington and Philly are now coming off terrific seasons, and that just increases the difficulty for your schedule. To give you a little bit of a heads up, Elliot, in 2026, because of the rotation, we already know most of the Giants' opponents, okay? So we know they're playing the NFC East home and away. They're also going to have home games against the Cardinals, the 49ers, the Jaguars, and the Titans, okay? On the road, there's be the division games plus the Texans, the Colts, the Rams, the Seahawks, and then there's going to be 3 wild card games. One is going to be based on what position they finish in the standings. There's going to be a team from the NFC South and a team from the NFC North that are also going to be flexible based on how the final standings end up this season. So we could already tell you the bulk of the schedule for the next 3 years. If we wanted to sit here and take the time to do it, it's because of the rotation and the way that it's set up. I just think that this year they got quite a mountain to climb. That's just the luck of the draw.
There is one opponent missing from that. The same
yes,
place,
that is the complete wild card team.
the same place AFC
Yes.
division.
Yes.
Which rotates every 4 years.
It is too early to ask a meeting with the people that made the schedule just to ask for a refund.
No, you can't ask for a refund. As every GM tells you, and every coach will say, you got to play what they throw in front of you. And this rotation of the schedule was based on trying to form some type of equitable situation across the league. So appreciate the time, Elliot. Thanks for the call. Take care. Please call us back again. Yeah, I mean, I get it. They finally decided to adapt this thing several years ago. It goes back a ways. And it was just like, well, we want to give the fans a chance with the rotation to be able to see the different opponents every few years. You want to see home, you want to see away, and then sometimes, like with the Giants, it seemed that though, like for a few years, we were constantly playing San Francisco or constantly playing Seattle. Sometimes it just works out that way because of the slot in that wild card situation where you have the TBDs.
Yep.
Sometimes it just works out that way.
Yeah. By the way, it was the Saints that was the third opponent this
that
year.
Was the
that
other,
was the
the
same
other
place.
empty one?
Saints, Patriots, and 49ers. Those are the 3 same place finish the opponents.
Yes, John.
Can we work on geography with you, Paul?
Well, technically, Puerto Rico is not part of the border. It's outside the border.
No. Puerto Rico is a part of the United States of America. It is a territory of the United States. You do not need a passport to go to Puerto Rico.
It is not part of the continental United States.
Okay, well, that's fine, but that's not the border then, is it? If you're crossing a border, you must provide your passport upon re-entry.
So
if you are returning from Puerto Rico, you do not require a passport.
So technically, you got me.
Yes, I did.
But it would not surprise you, of course, to know that I've never gone.
No, that is the least surprising part of this conversation.
Hey, what do you got up on the huddle this week, John? Just let everybody know.
Working on it. Today we might have a surprise guest. We'll see who that ends up being on the huddle. So we'll keep an eye on that. That'll be later on this afternoon.
Now I'm intrigued.
We'll see about that. And then later on this week, working on Mike Renner, who does he's now with the CBS Sports. Used to be a Pro Football Focus. He'll be up. Matt Manacharian, who runs Sports Info Jesus. Their stats. He's a former NFL scout with the Ravens. He's coming on, and I'm working on a couple other things for next week as well. And draft season coming up tomorrow. Tony Paulie and I will do our top 10s on offense at each position group, so that'll be fun.
Each position.
Every position. So we'll have a little debate there.
And real quick, just as we were on air, the Giants announced that re-signed linebacker Ty Summers.
A special teamer who got here in the middle of last season and did a pretty good job in coverage.
Yeah.
That was not the surprise guest I was referencing, just for the record.
He ended up playing...
You mean he doesn't want to talk to you?
No, he does not. I asked. He said no. Schmelk, no chance.
But yeah, Ty Summers played 16 games with the Giants last year, started 2 games primarily on special teams, but did, as you mentioned, get some action at linebacker. And, had one of his more productive seasons in the NFL. He's primarily been a special teams guy, but, given a chance to play a little defense last year, he really stepped up. So good to bring in, at the very least, another reliable special teams player back. And we'll see if he contributes on defense again.
Can't stress it enough. When you're a team trying to raise the boat, if you know every Sunday that you can win on special teams, that's a third of the game you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, and just more depth at the linebacker position. As we mentioned, you can never get enough depth at all of these positions because injuries are going to happen. You want guys you can rely on.
All right, folks, don't forget, Big Blue Kickoff Live returns live tomorrow on Tuesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time for another hour of Giants football. As always, it's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. From Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.